Effective communication, the key to relationships that work. The term effective means producing the intended result, or being adequate to accomplish a purpose. A key is an instrument that opens, or allows one with the key to gain access. Our definition of relationship means relate to me on my ship. The metaphor of this definition suggests that if you are sailing northwest, and I am sailing southeast, we will never be able to relate to one another because we are going in opposite directions. A basic definition of communication is simply an exchange of information, and we use words primarily for this exchange. For most of us, when we consider the meaning of communication, it is from the perspective of the language that we most frequently speak. In the United States, the primary language is English. However, the United States Census Bureau reports that there are between 350 to 430 languages spoken in America. If we speak English to another person that speaks English, we believe that we are communicating. Yet, this is not always true. For effective communication to occur, there must be an exchange of information that is comprehended and understood, fulfilling its purpose and the intended results. Effective, purposeful communication is not practiced until the full process of communication has been completed. Both the sender and the receiver bring to the exchange of information, past experiences, knowledge, feelings, and attitudes based on their life experiences, which includes both good and bad experiences. The medium or method of communication may be a letter, a text message, an email, or a phone call. What oftentimes is ignored or simply not thought about in the exchange of information are the sources of noise, both internal and external. Noise is anything that prevents a message from getting to the receiver accurately. External noise is a disruption in the communication process that occurs outside of the mind of the receiver. Examples include the siren of an ambulance, or police car driving down the street. Loud music or television programs in a room close by can also be examples of external noise. Internal noise occurs within a person's mind, which may include phobias or fear. Phobias, such as a fear of public speaking or a fear of rejection. Internal noise may also include a present illness that a family member is experiencing, which may include a challenging prognosis. Internal noise may also include a person's poor image of self, or what they think about themselves. In the science, or study of communication, most of us grew up with the standard, or transactional model of message, sender, receiver, and feedback. A transaction, for the purposes of this session, can be defined as relating to personal, or social interaction, characterized by mutual influence and exchange. Words are containers of power that create action. Words can tear down, or words can build up. Words have the power to bring life, or death physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. Words potentially create actions that can cause effects, bad or good. A judge or jury, by simply speaking words, can cause a person to be put to death or to live. Words often save lives. A doctor advises surgery, a weatherman issues a tornado warning, a counselor gives hope to a suicidal person. The tongue, a method of speech or exchange of information, is used throughout Scripture in both literal and metaphorical ways, especially in Psalms, Proverbs, and James. The word tongue is often a reference to the spoken word. This is a figure of speech in English called metonymy, in which one word stands in for another, or a closely related word. The Passion Translation of James 3:5-6 provides us with an example of metonymy where one word stands in for another. And so the tongue is a small part of the body, yet it carries great power. Just think of how a small flame can set a huge forest ablaze. And the tongue is a fire. It can be compared to the sum total of wickedness, and is the most dangerous part of our human body. It corrupts the entire body and is a hellish flame. It releases a fire that can burn throughout the course of human existence. Proverbs 15:4 states, "A deceitful tongue crushes the spirit." Tongue is a metonymy in this passage. Obviously, a literal, fleshly tongue cannot crush the human spirit, but the words the tongue produces can. Proverbs 18:21 reminds us the tongue, spoken word, has the power of death and life. As servant leaders, we have the responsibility to walk in the truth of the modern English version of Colossians 4:6 that declares, "Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you should answer everyone." Grace in this passage can be translated as an attitude of kindness towards someone, wishing to prosper them. As servant leaders, our communication, what we speak, must always be with grace, answering and sharing what it is that makes life in Christ different from the world. We also see the grace of God, an attitude of kindness, in Genesis 18:17. The grace of God, naturally, spiritually, and emotionally occurred for Abraham when the Lord said, "Shall I hide, cover, conceal from Abraham that thing which I do?" God was the sender, spiritual, Abraham was the receiver, natural, of the message. There was no noise, cell phone, appointment, attention span, or thinking about something else to interfere with receiving the message from the medium, or method of communication, which was God's voice. We know Abraham received, and understood the information, the message without noise that God communicated, or sent, because he responded by attempting to intervene on behalf of the city, that showed concern, or emotion. In Genesis 18, beginning at verse 24, Abraham asks, "Lord, if you find 50, 40, 30, 20, 10 righteous, will you spare the city?" And God said in Genesis 18:32, "I will not destroy it for 10's sake." Genesis 18:33, in the Living Bible then declares, "And the Lord went on his way when he had finished his conversation with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his tent." Effective communication is not talking at someone, it is talking with someone, as seen in Genesis 18 with God and Abraham, where there was both understanding and comprehension in the exchange of information. If there is no authentic exchange of information, we invite misinterpretation, inaccurate decoding, miscommunication, no clear exchange of information, misinformation, missing information, misunderstanding, no comprehension, misguide, leading in the wrong direction, mistake, incorrect actions or conduct. As we strengthen our ability to listen effectively, we increase the possibility of our comprehension, that reduces the possibility of the preceding realities of ineffective communication from occurring. Effective listening means hearing the message that has been sent, making meaning of it, and responding in a way that lets the sender know, you truly understand. Ephesians 4:15 also gives us a pattern to follow, for effective communication that teaches, and trains us to, speak the truth in love. There are two principles in this passage for effective spirit-filled communication: speak the truth, and speak in love. The goal of effective spirit-filled communication must be truth, or it is not communication, as much as it may be manipulation. Before we ever start talking, or writing, or doing anything else that conveys information to others, we need to make sure that what we are communicating, at least to the best of our ability, is to understand what is true and what may not be true. Without truth, there can be no trust, and without trust, you will lose the ability to get people to listen to what you have to say. When we speak the truth, we align ourselves with this anonymous quote that says, "Speak in such a way that others love to listen to you. And listen in such a way that others love to speak to you." Effective communication is always built upon a foundation of truth, trust, and listening. The second part of Ephesians 4:15, love, makes the first part, truth, easy to be received. This means that we do what we do, out of love, so that the person you are speaking to, and communicating with, has the potential to become a better version of themselves, experiencing truth that transforms. The Amplified Bible version of Romans 12:2 declares, "Do not be conformed to this world, this age, fashioned after and adapted to its external, superficial customs, but be transformed, changed, by the entire renewal of your mind, by its new ideals and its new attitude, so that you may prove, for yourselves, what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God, even the thing which is good and acceptable and perfect, in His sight for you." When we speak truth from a heart of love, that truth will be free of harsh language, unnecessary accusation, or manipulation. Love is what keeps truth from becoming a weapon. Truth spoken in love makes truth helpful and constructive, and not destructive. Speaking from a heart of love further means that we take time to understand the truth. In other words, before we can speak the truth, we need to know the truth. Many are quick to communicate what we believe to be true, without taking the necessary time to investigate what is actually true. Emotions are rarely helpful when determining truth. In a time or situation of conflict, take the necessary time to calm down personally before communicating something that you may later regret. Our emotions can convince us that anything is true because of how it feels. Disciplining ourselves to remove the feelings and emotions from communication will enable us to see more clearly what is true and what is not true. Wherever there is an exchange of information, this includes asking the right questions of yourself and others to determine the truth before attempting to communicate. Not only will this help you to communicate more clearly, but it may also keep you from embarrassing or defending yourself when more facts that you may have overlooked are presented. We cannot be afraid to admit that we may not have all of the facts. If you are not sure what is actually true, but feel like you need to act, be careful to acknowledge the areas that your understanding may be lacking in. No one knows everything. In the exchange of information for spirit-filled effective communication, this includes choosing the right time. It doesn't matter how good you are at communicating if you communicate at the wrong time. Communication involves giving and receiving. If the receiver is not in a good place mentally or emotionally to receive what you are sending or giving, the message will not be as effective as it otherwise might have been. In the exchange of information for effective spirit-filled communication, create a positive environment by beginning all communication with positive affirmations. Affirmation in its original Latin root means to make steady or to strengthen. This will set the tone and put the listener in a position where they are more likely to accept what is being communicated, because the tone steadies and strengthens the listener. That further creates confidence. Regardless of what may have been said, if the goal is to speak the truth in love, then you should also end the communication with affirmation. We cannot make people think and feel what we want, but we can do our best to let them know that we care about them, have their best interest in mind, and believe in them. Speaking the truth in love is the language spoken fluently by anyone who hopes to influence others to accept the mission and assignment of the church, which is to seek and save those that are lost. Luke 19:10. In the final analysis, the components of clear, effective communication include both the natural and spiritual elements as noted in 1 Corinthians 15:46, the communication process at the beginning of this session, speaking the truth in love in Ephesians 4:15, and the 7 components that follow for an effective exchange of information. The first component is time. God and Abraham invested time together. The second component is accurateness of message. If the information in the message is faulty, effective communication will not occur. The third component of effective communication is the sender. The sender is always responsible for the content of the message and to ensure that the content is correct. The fourth component is the medium or method. It may be a text message, an email, or a phone call, or face-to-face. For effective communication to occur, it means selecting the best method by which to communicate any given message. The fifth component is the receiver. The receiver is the destination of the message. Each receiver brings to the exchange of information, past feelings, emotions, and attitudes from past life experiences. The sixth component is response. A response in communication is the reaction to the message. The response can be positive or negative. Remember that the sender is responsible for the content of the message. An effective communicator practices being respectful, even if the response is negative, and always works towards resolution. The final component is feedback. Without open, honest feedback in communication, we may never know as a leader or organization if we are consistently doing well, or if there are areas that need to be improved for greater efficiency. When these principles are practiced, as in the natural 2 examples of the communication process, and the spiritual example of Genesis 18:17-24-33, and Ephesians 4:15, ineffective communication is mitigated, and we become better able to strike the target of results for effective communication. Jesus says in the Living Bible version of Luke 12:48, "Much is required from those to whom much is given, for their responsibility is greater." As servant leaders, we have the greater responsibility to practice and become effective communicators, which is the key to every relationship that works.